It's 5:06 here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Earlier today, Senator JD Vance addressed a group at the Philos Project Memorial Rally in March on the National Mall, talking about this date, October 7th, and recognizing the Hamas terror attack 1 year ago today.
And I know that there are many, many people who want the war to end. I am certainly one of those who wants the war to end and wants peace to return to Israel and to the territories that are currently completely destroyed by war. But the truth is that the best way to end the war, and I believe the only way to end the war, is if Hamas would let the hostages go.
Joining us now, Senator JD Vance from the state of Ohio and the vice presidential candidate for the Republican Party. Sir, good to have you with us.
It's good to be with you. Thank you.
Give me your sense on this date, what this day means for us. I know you brought up the Americans who were killed last year, as well as the many Israelis, and there are still Americans who are being held hostage today.
Yeah, no, that's where my mind goes, certainly today. Obviously a very sad day, over 1,000 Israelis killed. And I think a lot of Americans sometimes think of this as just a terrorist attack that happened in Israel. But of course, you know, over 30 Americans were killed. You have multiple Americans who are still being held hostage today. And I think it's important for us to remember this not just as an Israeli event, but also an American event where a lot of innocent Americans lost their lives. And I actually talked to the family, met with some of the family members beforehand of some of those hostages. You know, one in particular talking about her 22-year-old brother, who had his 22nd birthday in Hamas captivity and is about to have his 23rd birthday in Hamas captivity. And just think about the unbelievable barbarism, what that kid's life is like. I'm sure that he's hungry, tired, thirsty, certainly terrified for his life. We can't forget these people because there are people, and we got to get them out.
President Trump likes to say that were he president, that none of this would have ever happened. And I think there is some evidence to support that, a lot of it, actually. And if you look back, the Biden administration unleashed a lot of funding that went to Iran that's been used to commit these acts of terror. And that includes not just by Hamas, but also Hezbollah. And additionally, this past weekend, you have Kamala Harris saying that she's proud to announce another $157 million in humanitarian relief for Lebanon. Senator, would we need to send that kind of money if Hezbollah wasn't funded to commit its acts of terror?
No, we certainly wouldn't. And I think what is so true when President Trump says this wouldn't have happened if he were president is you have to ask yourself, what is the financing mechanism for all this terrorism in the Middle East? And very often the answer is it ties back to Iran. How much money has Iran had unfrozen by the Kamala Harris, Joe Biden regime? And the answer is close to $100 billion. So, of course, not all of that money goes into terrorism, but a lot of it does. A lot of it goes to weapons, to rockets, to missiles that have been fired, not just to the Israelis, but also to Americans. Of course, we've lost a few Americans in the Middle East in the last 6 months as well. So we really have to recognize that while we want peace, and of course we want to accomplish peace however we can, we have to be realists about it, or we end up leading to more war. And if you're giving one of the most hostile regimes in the world, one of the biggest, maybe the single biggest state sponsor of terrorism, access to tens of billions of dollars, you have to be honest with yourselves about how they're going to use that money. And I just wish, honestly, after the last year that we've had, that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden kind of throw up their hands and say, you know what, we screwed up. We made a mistake. We sent a lot of money to some of the worst people in the world, and now they're using it to kill Americans and our friends. We're going to stop, but unfortunately, they just can't seem to do that.
Senator, it also follows a pattern where Washington continues to fund both sides of so many wars. We keep seeing that happen all the time. They give money to Ukraine, then they enable Russia to grow its war machine through its oil. The Nord Stream pipeline, all of that, and the extent to which it contributed to the Russian coffers. The same is true, as I just mentioned, with Iran and Israel. The same was true in Afghanistan, as we watched our troops die, as we were giving money to Pakistan, who was in turn giving it to the Taliban. Is there any point that we can break this cycle?
You know, I think we can. We just have to have smarter leadership. I mean, this is something that I think President Trump appreciated very well in his foreign policy, that obviously we want peace, but the stupidest thing of all is to fund both sides of military conflict. You're exactly right. I mean, Russia's entire war machine is powered by high energy prices. which in some ways the Biden-Harris administration have enabled. We're funding to the tune of almost $100 billion in unfrozen assets, the Iran side of the war, but of course we're also supporting the Israelis. Like, we just need to actually pick and choose and be smart with how we send our resources. I think a lot of Americans, they recognize that, the State Department, the leadership of the country is going to conduct foreign policy, but we can't possibly justify funding both sides of a military conflict. In some ways, we just prolong this stuff. We ensure that it goes longer than it should. We kill, a lot of additional people die when you prolong these conflicts unnecessarily. It's just a lose-lose proposition. We have to be much smarter about how we spend our money.
Meanwhile, we have chaos here in the United States. Hurricane Helene just ran roughshod over the southeastern United States. And additionally, we're watching now as Hurricane Milton is barreling towards the Gulf Coast. I know you were touring some of the damage in the Commonwealth of Virginia alongside Governor Glenn Youngkin last week. What are your thoughts on these storms, what they're doing to our country, and how the federal government's responding?
Well, I think that, there's, of course, a lot of conspiracy theorizing out there. And I think that the truth is that the big problem with how we respond to these hurricanes is bureaucratic incompetence. I don't think most of these guys are bad people. I just think it's like the DMV at an industrial scale. And unfortunately, when you're delaying resources by days, that can lead to additional loss of life and, at the very least, additional suffering. I mean, when I was in Virginia, I met with Glenn Youngkin, talked with him about the federal response. And I mean, look, these communities have been destroyed. I visited the town of Damascus, Virginia. Thank God no one had lost their lives there. That was really miraculous that a few of the people who had been carried away by the storms had been able to find shelter and not lose their life. But the amount of rebuilding folks are going to have to do is extraordinary. And these are communities that a lot of folks feel left behind even before the hurricane showed up. Their government had ignored them, had looked down upon them. This is the Appalachian region of the country, one of the poorest regions of the United States. So folks already feel like their government doesn't care about them. And then the hurricane hits and Kamala Harris is at a fundraiser and Joe Biden's at the beach. It doesn't send the right signal. The other big problem here is that we should have deployed the United States military to the hurricane site immediately.
Yes.
I'm talking about hours after the hurricane had left these communities. You should have had helicopters, the 82nd Airborne delivering resources and medicine and rescuing people. The fact that it took days to have a true military response just speaks to the complete failure of leadership on the ground.
Yeah, and that's a state, North Carolina, as you well know. You're a United States Marine. It's dense with bases, including some Marine Corps bases, Marine Corps air stations. You got the Army there, Fort Liberty now, and once known as Fort Bragg, and lots of resources available. Biden only dispatched, 1,000 soldiers this past week? And that was well after so much of the damage had taken place.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, days after the hurricane had hit land in North Carolina. Let me just illustrate this with a really crazy example. So in 2010, Port-au-Prince, Haiti had a terrible earthquake, and the 82nd Airborne was in Port-au-Prince 48 hours. It took the Biden administration a week to get the 82nd Airborne to a community in North Carolina that's about an hour away from where the 82nd Airborne is headquartered. That is a really striking indictment of our leadership. And I was actually talking with Elon Musk about this on Saturday. It's just bureaucratic incompetence. It's, one person and their own little bureaucratic fiefdom who's not talking to another person. It's the FAA isn't talking to the military. It's FEMA isn't talking to the FAA. There's just not enough coordination. And the only thing that really cuts through that coordination problem is leadership, right? You need the president or you need the vice president. You need somebody who's empowered to say, our goal is to save as many lives and to help as many people as possible. And you give them the authority they need to cut through all the red tape immediately. We haven't really had that until the last couple of days. And I'm sure that a lot of people in North Carolina are just now seeing federal resources arrive in their communities. It's about a week and a half too late.
Are you concerned that those residents of North Carolina and all the other storm-affected areas are going to have trouble voting this year? How attuned to that issue are you?
So I am concerned about it. I do think that in North Carolina, I was talking to the RNC chair, Michael Whatley, about this recently. He, of course, was the Republican Party chair of the state of North Carolina until recently. I think that we're actually in a good shape for what we need to ensure that people are able to vote in North Carolina. What I worry about more is actually motivation, right? I mean, think about this. You've got hundreds of families who are grieving a loved one, even those who are not in quite that bad of a shape. They're rebuilding their homes. Everything that they have and possessed has been destroyed. The message that I'd like to get out there to folks is look, yes, this has been an unspeakable human tragedy, especially to those who have lost a loved one. But the most important way we can ensure that our government is responsive to the needs of American citizens is to throw out the current bums and to get somebody in there who actually cares. And, of course, I believe that's Donald J. Trump. I know that a lot of folks in North Carolina feel left behind and forgotten. Get a government that is not going to leave you behind, is not going to forget you. And the only way to do that is to get out there and vote. So while I don't think that, by the time most people are voting in those precincts, I think they're going to have the ability to vote, and we're going to work very hard to make sure that happens. I do worry a little bit about motivation to vote in the wake of this tragedy.
Senator Vance, I want to talk politics with you, too. Last week, you, of course, did this debate against Governor Tim Walz. And I got to be honest, I sat down to watch the debate, and I was looking for Tampon Tim. I was waiting for you to say, he's putting tampons in the boys' rooms all over Minnesota. This guy's crazy. And you never did that. And then I realized at the conclusion of that debate, I said, wait a second. JD Vance's performance today was not built to convince me. I'm already convinced. What was the strategy last week?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I was trying to convince people who weren't fully aware of just how radical and incompetent Kamala Harris's time in government has been. I sort of went into this saying, I could attack Tim Walz over his record, over his misrepresentations, over, the tampons in the boys' bathrooms or any number of other crazy things that he's done. But I realized most Americans still don't have a strong view of Kamala Harris. So why not use my opportunity to talk about her record, to criticize the way that she has actually run the administration over the last 3.5 years, to criticize her for the open border, for casting the tie-breaking vote on trillions of dollars in new spending, just really to introduce to the American people why I think Kamala Harris has been so ineffective and why Donald Trump's time in office was much better when it comes to things like a secure border and rising take-home pay. And so I kind of ignored Tim Walz. And to the extent that, he and I, obviously had to respond to some of the points that he made. And there are some issues out there where actually I think he is more reasonable than she is. And so I tried to, use that to highlight just how radical she was. And that was the strategy that I went into it with. As I get 90 minutes to talk to about 50 million of my fellow Americans, why don't I talk to them about why I think Donald Trump would be a good president and Kamala Harris would be a bad one? That's the most effective way to use that time.
Can you tell us, what did President Trump say to you after the debate?
We talked about 5 minutes afterwards. He was very happy. He just said, hey, a great job. And he knew my wife was there in studio with me there at CBS in New York. And he just said, take that beautiful wife of yours, go and have a nice meal and enjoy it because you earned it. It was definitely, I could tell he was excited. I was obviously excited. And, now the hardest part of the campaign, this final 30 days, is upon us. But we're going to work for every vote, and I think we're going to win.
Senator Vance, finally, and thank you for your time today. I know you've talked a little bit before about what your internal polling is showing inside the Trump campaign and the fact that some reporters have smuggled over the data from the Kamala campaign to you as well. What are you hearing? How are you feeling? And what should we be encouraged by?
I mean, look, I feel very good about it. I think that it's tight, right? I mean, I think there are a couple of states where I feel very good, Georgia and Arizona. I think, Pennsylvania, Nevada, North Carolina, I feel good about, but it's extremely tight. And I think Michigan and Wisconsin are probably about tied, or maybe we're slightly ahead. Now, we don't have to win all 7 of those states, of course. We only have to win 4 or 5. But I think we just have to really work our tails off. Nobody knows what the final electorate's going to look like. These polls all have big margins of error. So even the polls that I look at that make me feel good, I say, well, if they're off by just a few points, right, this thing could go in the other direction. We just have to work really hard, and we have to get people out there to vote. The biggest difference between Democrats and Republicans is I talked to 100 people in 2020 who wanted to vote for Donald Trump, and I talked to 100 people who wanted to vote for Joe Biden. Democrats got 98, 99 of those 100 people to the polls. Republicans, we got 94, 95. And so to anybody who's listening, just get people out there to vote. We know that we have the votes necessary to win this race. We just need to get people out there and make sure we cross the finish line the right way. Look, man, I feel very good about the race. But I don't feel so good that we're letting off the brakes. We're going to work hard for every vote. We're going to run through the finish line. And I think we're going to make Donald Trump the next president, but only if we work our butts off.
And we've already been early voting in Virginia. You think that's winnable?
Look, I think it's winnable. I think it is a reach, to be clear, but I actually think that it really is winnable here. You've got a great Senate candidate in Virginia, Hung Cal. You've got a great governor, obviously. And I talked to Glenn about this when I was in southwestern Virginia. Just very briefly, I said, well, how do you think we're doing? And, he said, look, I think that it's in a very winnable place. And, again, it just depends who shows up to vote. So if you're in Virginia, get out there, vote for Donald Trump, and I think we do have a chance of winning this thing.
Senator JD Vance, sir, thank you very much for your time today. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Be well. All right, thanks again to Senator JD Vance for stopping by. Not that long until the election. We're getting close now. We're in the midst of election season. I should add that qualifier. Now, he's a guy who can speak English. Now let's take you to a woman who can't. Kamala Harris was in Michigan this weekend, and apparently her teleprompter broke down, and when that happens, it sounds like this.
Remember his number, 32. Today we got 32 days until the election.
Uh-oh.
So 32 days.
Uh-oh.
32 days. Okay, we got some business to do. All right. 32 days. And we know we will do it. And this is going to be a very tight race until the very end. This is going to be a very tight race until the very end. We are the underdog, and we know we have some hard work ahead.
I think they call that in media vamping. You're supposed to just stretch a little bit, vamp, just make it up as you go along. There's nothing in front of you. You're up there on the tightrope now. There's no net to catch you, so walk, baby. She can't. She just flipped, crashed. It's Kamala Harris. She'd like to be president. No, we've had enough of the people who can't speak. No more of those, please. Good afternoon to you. 5:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Do you ever watch the Sunday shows, the broadcast, political Sunday shows? It's okay if the answer to that is no. They were especially insane this weekend, like Looney Tunes, which is kind of a sign of the left's desperation right now. They're becoming very emotionally incontinent, or at least continuing to be. For instance, on Meet the Press this weekend, Andrea Mitchell was one of the guests, and she was saying that Kamala Harris needs to double down on doing interviews. Do more interviews, Kamala Harris. Of course, she's doing a bunch of, like, pathetic conversations, chit-chats with her friends this week, Howard Stern, not real interviews. And she said one of the reasons Kamala needs to do more interviews is because white men and black men specifically are misogynists. And they're not convinced that she's up to the job because she's a woman. This is Andrea Mitchell's assessment. So she says that it's black men and white men who are misogynists. Take a listen.
Andrea. I think they've got to double down on doing more interviews and serious interviews, because what I'm hearing from Democratic and Republican business people and a lot of men, and she's got such a big problem with men. I think there's an undercount of the Trump vote. I think there is misogynation in all of this, black and white men. Big problem, but also the business world. They don't think she is serious. They don't think she's a heavyweight. And a lot of this is gender, but she's got to be more specific about her economic plan.
So there she goes. She's attacking black men, saying that they're misogynists. She's attacking white men, saying they're misogynists. And no one is going to call her to account for this at all. Well, besides us. We'll call it out. But that's where it ends. So you remember where you were the moment that story died. It was right here on WMAL. It was the last anybody ever heard of it. But Andrea Mitchell saying that she's got a big problem with men. And it's because they're sexist, obviously. And how is she going to overcome that? She has to do more interviews, because men like watching interviews, I think that's the conclusion. I'm not really sure. The press was going crazy this weekend as well over Eric Trump loving his father. Eric Trump got out there at the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania on Saturday and said that there have been all sorts of forces trying to take his dad down. They've been doing it for years, and that's a bad thing. So, of course, the press attacked him for it. Here's Eric Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, Saturday.
They've tried to get my father every single second since he went down that golden escalator. Laura and I have witnessed it every single day. They tried to smear us. They tried to bankrupt us. They came after us. They impeached him twice. They went after his Supreme Court justices. They weaponized the entire legal system. The Russia hoax, the dirty dossiers. You remember every single one of them. Far left AGs, far left DAs in every far left place in this country went after my father. They tried to pull him off the ballot in Colorado. They tried to pull him off the ballot in Maine. And it has not worked. And then, guys, they tried to kill him. They tried to kill him. And it's because the Democratic Party, they can't do anything right. They can't do anything right. You see it this week in the FEMA response in North Carolina, and in Georgia, and in South Carolina, and in Florida. You have people's houses floating down rivers. And what does Kamala do? She comes out and says, yes, I'd like to give that family $750. We send $200 billion over to Ukraine so beautiful young kids can shoot at each other in trenches.
All right, so that's Eric Trump in a clip that you're not going to hear at that length in any of the legacy media this weekend because they wanted to attack him over that. Now, if we could summarize what he just said, it's pretty simple. Rather than work to improve your life, the left seeks to hold on to power by demonizing their political opponent, even going so far as to breathe life into the attempts to assassinate him. They don't care how reckless their speech is. They don't care the way people interpret it. They don't care how they then turn around and attempt to assassinate Donald Trump, which happened on July 13th on the very stage that Eric Trump delivered that message from, which is now surrounded, as it was this weekend, by bulletproof glass in order to keep Trump alive. That's how crazy things have gotten. So everything Eric Trump said there was unimpeachably true, speaking of impeachment. It was all true. That is the history of the way that they have gone after Trump. And that leads us to the way the media handled it this weekend, the legacy press. Old George, what does Trump call him? Slopadopoulos. George Stephanopoulos this weekend on ABC had Speaker Mike Johnson on, and he played him a tiny, tiny little clip of Eric Trump and said, he's saying that the Democrat Party is trying to kill Trump. Listen to Speaker Johnson react.
In the wake of the assassination attempts on Donald Trump, you urged all sides to tone down the rhetoric. So is it right for the president and his family to suggest that Democrats are behind the effort to assassinate him?
I just saw the clip. I was at an event in Texas last night, so I didn't watch all the remarks from Pennsylvania. I will tell you, I talked to President Trump right after it, and he was pleased. They had a massive crowd there and a lot of enthusiasm and energy. But I didn't hear all the comments. I don't know the context. The clip that I just heard.
That's the throat clearing's weak. The throat clearing's weak. Just shove back on George Stephanopoulos. This is a very stupid line of questioning for a bunch of reasons. One of them is that the shooters themselves were very proud Democrats. Both the first guy, Thomas Crooks, as well as the second guy, Ryan Ruth, they were both Act Blue donors. They were very much on Team Democrat. They were giving their own money to advance the electoral prospects of Democrats. And in Ryan Ruth's case specifically, he posted all over social media the talking points that were given to him by the Biden-Harris White House. Democracy's on the ballot, he said. He had a Biden-Harris bumper sticker back when that was a real campaign on the back of his truck in Hawaii. These guys have not made it a secret who they support. They've given their money and their speech to that cause, and then turned around and attempted to give a bullet to that cause as well, to try and assassinate Donald Trump on those two occasions. So this game of pretend, George Stephanopoulos is pretending like he's doing journalism. But if he was, he would say any of what I just told you. But he doesn't. He just pretends like it's absurd that you would think that Democrats need to tone it down at all, that they need to stop saying a lie, which is that Trump is a, quote, threat to democracy, when in fact, as President Trump said, he took a bullet for it. actually.
Heard that you just played there, George. I don't think they're saying that the Democratic Party tried an assassination attempt. I think what they're alluding to is what we've all been saying. They have got to turn the rhetoric down. For years now, the leading Democrats in this country, the highest elected officials and the current nominee for president, have gone out and said that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, that, the republic will end if he's reelected. It's absolute nonsense. Yeah. And they have incited dangerous people to do dangerous things. The rhetoric has. I think that is a fact that's objective that everybody can agree to. We do need to turn the volume down. We have to have vigorous debates about policy, but not take it to that level. No one involved in this is a threat to the republic.
But Mr. Speaker, you just said Democrats are. You said their rhetoric is inciting. We all just saw what both President Trump.
Yeah, the guy who said democracy's on the ballot tried to shoot Trump. Where did that come from? Where did that talking point come from? Or maybe it came directly from you, George.
Former President Trump and his son Eric said. Eric actually did specifically reference Democrats. He said they tried to kill him. They tried to kill him, and it's because the Democratic Party, they can't do anything right. Do you support those comments or not?
Yes.
I don't know what Eric was saying because I only...
No, stop it. Stop it. Speaker Johnson. Yes is the answer. Yes, I support those comments. That is the son of the former president, perhaps the future president, a man who watched his dad shot in the head on national television alongside the rest of us, was horrified by the fact that he almost lost his father, and is appropriately saying that Democrats have been out of control with their animosity, their Trump derangement syndrome, their hatred, their loathing for a man who merely wants to represent voters and earn those votes.
Heard just a snippet there. I don't know the context.
You just saw it,
Eric
sir.
is very level-headed and a very intelligent person. I saw your clip of it, George. I didn't see the full speech. We need to all look at these things in full context.
George Stephanopoulos is such a loser, that guy. They should dwarf toss him.
What they're referring to, though, is the absolute open attacks that have been engaged by Democrats against President Trump since the day he came down that golden escalator in 2016.
All right, so that all continued on ABC because later then they have the panel. They bring in the panel, all the experts, the political experts. And on the panel, George Stephanopoulos, of course, Slapadopoulos, still there hosting, but he brings in Donna Brazile, the woman who was leaking debate questions to Hillary Clinton. And Reince Priebus. Now, if Reince Priebus gets upset on national television, you've gone way too far. Reince Priebus, he's one of the single most vanilla political commentators you've ever seen. Reince Priebus is angry. He's just furious over this, and this is what Reince rage sounds like.
We need both political parties, both leaders. Do not go out there and blame Haitians. Do not go out there and blame immigrants and migrants. That is the rhetoric we hear every day. And if you cannot say that Joe Biden won this election, Joe Biden won the election, then you should not.
This show is not a monologue, Donna.
No, but it is
the fact of the matter is,
people have
it's
the floodgate of lies.
Okay? And the fact of the matter is, this is a former president and a son that, number one, came extremely close to losing his life and losing his father, okay? He's been called a threat to democracy from the very beginning. They got rid of a sitting president to fulfill their message that he's a threat to democracy. And in order to save this country, they had a sitting president step down, put in a vice president in the summer. This is how they feel about it, and this is how everyone on the Democratic Party feels about it. So don't sit here and act like holier than thou.
Where's this come from? Man, that boy ate his Wheaties Sunday morning, did he not? He went full Popeye. He choked down a can of spinach just before this.
I'm not holy, baby. I'm telling you the truth.
You have a corner on this message because you don't.
And you don't.
And that's why you're not winning. That's why Harris is behind, and that's why she's going to lose. People aren't buying the rhetoric.
She's not behind.
People are not buying the rhetoric.
We're not buying the lies.
Why can't you simply say that blaming Democrats for the association?
I would not blame Democrats.
Why can't you simply echo Kamala's talking points? Why can't you do that, Reince Priebus? George asks insincerely.
I just said it, okay? But it's also wrong to paint the President of the United States, President Trump, as the threat to democracy that's going to end the United...
The former president, she screeches. Yeah. like trying to score points with the craziest possible lefty viewers, the few they have left.
States of America. What does that do to people's heads when you do that? What does that do to millions, hundreds of millions of people in America?
Yes.
What does that do
has
to
an
legal
effect,
immigrants?
guys.
What does
Wake
it
up.
do to legal immigrants when you know you're lying? What does it do to kids who are trying to go to school?
Why are they always looking out for illegals? Why is that the biggest thing? Have you noticed? Every time. It's like, hey, I can't believe an illegal just killed a woman in my neighborhood. Well, you know, Americans commit more crimes than illegals. Those, like, what? So your answer to the illegal alien who raped and killed in the neighborhood is that Americans are worse? That's your retort? And Donna Brazile is mounting some great defense of illegal aliens in the United... What is this? They're not interested in the needs of American citizens. If that's the position you're backing up into, well, think of the illegals. You deserve to be nowhere near American power. And yet, we have the opposite construction right now. It's the complete opposite construction. It's how it's so easy for Kamala Harris to put out tweets about how we need to send Lebanon more money right now. And meanwhile, North Carolina is just trying to get back online. They're delivering medicine to people by mule. Donna Brazile. Unbelievable. I mean, actually, totally believable, but still appalling. Phil's in Fredericksburg. He's on line 3. Phil, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Vince, you mentioned that Kamala Harris tweeted they're giving $157 million to Lebanon, but FEMA has no money to help Americans. That money, that $157 million goes to North Carolina, and they better mobilize the military. This has got to stop. America has to be protected. Jesus Christ, what are these people doing?
It's infuriating, Phil. It's infuriating. Thank you for your call, as always. Phil's right to be angry about that. A lot of people are angry about that. I'm angry about that. It tells you everything. Peter Doocy said it today to Corinne, remember? He said, Biden says this all the time. Show me your budget, and I'll show you your values. That's an old Bidenism, something his grandfather used to say. Show me what you spend your money on, and I'll show you your values. The Biden administration, the Harris administration, they've shown us what they believe in and who they care about. And I have bad news for North Carolina. The Bidenism is to the whenever he can actually deliver it. Don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value. I'll tell you what you value. Tom's in D.C., line 1. Hello, Tom. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Yes, and a follow-up to that. It just, you've got some angry callers there.
Yeah.
I wish to just point out it's not unique to the United States. I just got back from Italy again. It's what's happening here, same thing happening in Europe, and by the same people and for the same reason. Their left is pursuing the same kinds of policies, and the long term is the left will call it a conspiracy theory, but it's not a theory. It's an actual conspiracy. They're actually working to do it, and that is they seek to destroy the national sovereignty of the individual nations to bring about a one-world order under themselves with a power sharing with their fellow leftists. And the whole position is they're stealing, just like in Italy, they're stealing people's retirement, and they're shifting it over to fund illegal aliens. The horrendous part of this is now Milan, which was, it is the business capital, but also a pearl of Italy, now has the most dangerous city in Italy. Unheard of. It's usually in the south, but all this garbage has moved up to the north.
Yes.
My family, everybody, their homes are being burglarized left and right. The same kind of crime that was always in the south is now hitting the north. And the government, now, I know that...
Tom, I'm sorry,
Georgia
brother. I got to
Maloney
run. This is great. Call me back, Tom. I appreciate this. But Tom's right to identify this is a global phenomenon, and the American left is very much a part of the same club. Donald Trump is not. He's for sovereignty. So are you, and so am I. The great one, Mark Levin, up next.